I just can't help but leave this message to, I mean, whoever would listen, now or in the future. This time, or what is today? Today is the 10th of April 2026. And this time we live in, man, I mean, I think what surprises me the most of what I see out of human behavior, I mean, there are so many things are so obvious, manifest. But the one thing that I just never, it's hard to comprehend this one because it doesn't make any sense. What I've been able to recognize in Jesus' name, giving glory to God the Father, Yahweh, by who we know as Jesus Christ, the Lord, risen, exalted, glorified. Is how overwhelming the cowardice is. Cowardice. And you think, okay, we tend to give ourselves an excuse, and others we'll describe like what it is that we see as maybe apathy, because I mean apathy is something that sounds a lot better than cowardice, doesn't it? So, but there is this willful ignorance, and I understand it's like a survival mentality, a mindset. Whereas, what I saw from the fallout, the illegal burn off, and then fallout of carcinogenic industrial chemicals into District 17, Pennsylvania, that was kept quiet intentionally. Whereas I captured a video capture of massive, what were chemical clouds, like that, from an illegal burn off. Smoke that was laden with carcinogens, industrial strength like carcinogens, industrial strength chemicals that were illegally burned off. If you hear the facts, if I tell you the facts, if I could just let you hear this, and hear the comparison to what it is that has been supplanted, the narrative, which anyone that knows about this disaster, the Norfolk Southern derailment on the 3rd of February 2023, what they know about it. If you're here, you live in District 17, there's a good chance that you don't know. But for those people that do know, that are quiet, there would have to be quite a few people that know that East Palestine is not where the disaster was. The derailment was on the outskirts of East Palestine, to the east of East Palestine, right on the Pennsylvania border. And all of the contaminants, when I say this, let me be clear about this, because of course you've got cars that were burnt off in Ohio, but it occurred on the border, so on the outskirts of East Palestine. But all of the winds were to the east, onto Pennsylvanians. District 17, Beaver and Lawrence County. And the chemicals, they had properties by which they went up with the heat, but then, the particles that are very dangerous, carcinogenic particles from, what they burned off, the hazardous materials, but they collected water molecules that got heavy and then fell out, So when they disappeared off of radar and satellite imagery, it's because everything was then on the ground, because it just got heavy, and whatever cocktail of chemicals they were burning off did then coat, District 17, Beaver and Lawrence County, Pennsylvania. And it was kept completely out of the media, meaning the media worked with Norfolk Southern, those companies that they were hauling the chemicals for, multi-billion-dollar corporations. And the Ohio authorities, they were hand in hand complicit in the crimes of burning the shit off illegally and then keeping it quiet. The obfuscation, the redirection, the supplanting of the lie that it was East Palestine. And they literally reported on the disaster in East Palestine in safety. And the firefighters, when they got there, the night of the derailment fires on the 3rd, that Friday night, they were told to not put out the fires. So the firemen stood around with their arms crossed for 3 days while Norfolk Southern had their people and then contractors brought in from out of state to burn the shit off illegally, burn it all off. It was totally illegal. They made a decision early on to burn everything off. They could have offloaded, I'm saying, all of that shit, all of the 34 railroad containers, at least, that they burned off illegally that were carrying hazardous materials. They could have pumped that shit into, when I say pumped, it was chemicals that were, liquid. I'm saying chemicals. A lot of it was. They could have pumped it into containers on either side of the rails and taken it to special incinerators facilities we have here in the United States, that nullify hazardous materials, the dangerous properties. But they decided to not do that. They were like, for save time and money, to then just burn it all off. And they used, not only our authorities, the policemen, what have you, our firefighters, were used as to pose for the media, to look like they were there to put out the fires, with the lights flashing and maybe even down west of the derailment. They might have had on a water cannon, which I didn't see that in any of the news reports. But, they were all there posing. They staged it like they were trying to put out the fires. Imagine that. That's what they did. But Governor DeWine, the Ohio governor of Ohio, Governor DeWine, do you know he declared a false state of emergency to activate our Army National Guard, and he used them to commit a crime against our citizens? Imagine that. That's traitorous. But he did that. I know. You see, I captured video of them, Norfolk Southern, burning off containers. I could see that they were burning the shit off. There was smoke coming over from where I live, in Darlington. I could see it. And then I went to Chippewa, a couple of days, Saturday and Sunday, and I could see the smoke was just still coming over, to the east. I'm like, I was thinking, what the hell is that they're burning off? I knew they were burning the shit off. And they were acting like they were trying to put the fires out. They could have brought in, if they couldn't handle putting the fires out, they had specialists there at the Pittsburgh airport or the Cleveland airport, or firefighters that work for, that are trained, that are around those companies that manufactured the chemicals. They could have been brought in. They could have put those fires out real fast, They made a decision to not do it, to burn the shit off. And it was all illegal. And when I say cowardice, I just have to interject that, because that's why I'm leaving this message. It is like, you look and you're like, holy shit, there's nobody that will use the word criminal, illegal, nothing. In my video capture of the massive contamination from the 6th, that's when they did the massive burn. Let me go back. to the day before they did that on Sunday, on the 5th of February 2023. I decided to go up there and get some footage, and I did. I was there on Route 51 on the highway goes over the tracks. The tracks go under the highway is what I'm saying, from Route 51. And, with my camera, I captured them. There was a guy down there with a caution vest on. That's it. No hazardous hazmat gear or nothing. He was down there, just monitoring, railroad containers that they were burning off. And I captured all that, and that was a Sunday afternoon. I sent it out to all of the media, ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox, everybody, the whole alphabet, everyone I could think of. And I was like, encouraging them, somebody, tell the public, what is being done here. Maybe you can embarrass, Norfolk Southern and those Ohio authorities, and to stop doing what they're doing, because I knew the shit was bad. I didn't know what it was, and nobody said anything really about what it was. I mean, I didn't get a list of the chemicals until they sent out their silencing settlement package, which I opted out of because they based it on 5 containers. And it was 34, at least 34 that they burnt off. And it's a radius settlement. They based it on a radius, and the winds never blew to the west. It was all to the east for 3 days. You can look at satellite and radar imagery, the history. It's all there irrefutably. And, I sent that footage out, and within 2 hours of my sending out, Governor DeWine declared a false state of emergency. And they made up this story. And here's what's interesting. It really burned in Jesus' name, really, was really offensive, man. I sent with the footage a note. I said, what if, one of these containers, because they're burning, if it gets so hot and then it empties out and then it sucks oxygen into one of those tankers and it explodes. Being just some, layman. I don't know, when I say layman, somebody that doesn't know shit about, what those containers can do. Like, what can you push them to do? I mean, Norfolk Southern, obviously, they have experience. They know what they can push them to. They probably burnt shit off, over the years, in different places where they've used the local authorities to block off roads and burnt shit off. I know they have. I conjecture they have. I don't know, but I would say yes. But I sent that footage out with that note, and then they would, what they said when they declared a false state of emergency, they said that there was one container that had built up pressure, and they needed to go in there and let the pressure off of one container. They called it a controlled release. They said they'd had to do that. And, Governor DeWine and those Ohio authorities, they declared a false state of emergency and kept people out from capturing their preparations for the massive burn off of whatever was left on the site. Whereas they went in there and they put the fires out that they said they could get nowhere near. Then they dug out trenches along the tracks with heavy equipment. They pumped out that highly flammable chemical into those trenches. And then you saw that when they lit it on fire on the 6th, that plume, that giant fire, when they lit that shit on fire, went up high. But then, as I said, the winds were blowing to the east, and you had that happening. So, the people in East Palestine, they weren't there then. They were evacuated. But even then, with the heat from that ship being, the fire, the heat made it go so high, right? it didn't fall out anywhere in Ohio or Pennsylvania. It went up and then was carried over with the winds. And as I had said, the Honorable Sil Sagano, a fire chief from the Youngstown Fire Department, he went on Channel 27 Youngstown. Channel 27 was honorable. Man, they let this fire chief go on there. And he said, look, these chemicals, they're dangerous. And he was telling them you shouldn't be doing this. And he came out, man, he is really courageous. He came out and said, he must have known, what they were going to do. Because he was talking about how dangerous they were. And he said that the chemicals involved, he said they have what do you call it? What's the word to look for? A property by which they would, the particles would attract water molecules, and that they would get heavy, the particulates, and he said they would fall then. Like, when I say the fallout was in Pennsylvania, that's what I'm talking about. And that's what you see in the video that I captured. And it wasn't just the media that I captured there on the scene with the fallout, WTAE, Channel 4 Action News. They're out of Pittsburgh, and they never aired any footage. They never aired any warning. They never gave anybody, in Pennsylvania an opportunity to tape up their windows and doors and shelter in place. Intentionally, they left thousands of people oblivious. They must have had a directive, from Norfolk Southern or the Ohio authorities. But it wasn't just that media that I saw there at that I captured out of Pittsburgh when they were there at the junction of 168 and 51 there in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. All of the media, the state television stations and shit out of Pittsburgh, Youngstown, that were covering it, they had access to radar. And radar you don't just see the radar. We think, when we watch a news weather report, we just look, we see the images. They know the altitude of those clouds. They know they know all kinds of details about what they see with the radar. So they knew about it. And our federal authorities then also, they knew. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that's because it was, courageous. The one thing I saw out of the Biden administration that I think was their moment that they stepped up was they defied those corporations, Norfolk Southern and the corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations they were hauling the shit for, that they illegally burned off. But the Biden administration, they came out after they saw the video I captured on the 6th, and they even said, we see you in Darlington Township. We see it. We see, and that was pretty wild because they publicly came out and admitted that the fallout, how much they said publicly about it. Did they come out and say Lawrence and Beaver County, which, it was? I don't know, but I know I was being surveilled, monitored real tight, from state and federal authorities to keep me from getting the footage out. And sharing it is what I'm saying it. Well, Norfolk Southern never mentioned one thing about the danger, what they had done, what the exposure. They were exposing thousands of people in Pennsylvania to these carcinogens. And they kept it quiet because it was a multi-billion-dollar disaster here in Pennsylvania. So they intentionally, but... shit, man, it's just it's overwhelming. I mean, I'm just as many times as I've mentioned this, because I've contacted authorities, local all the way up to 2 administrations now, 2 federal administrations, everybody in between. I've contacted in the chain. In truth, and nobody did anything. Nobody said anything or gave a shit about what was done. But yeah, I mean, I had Governor Shapiro hanging on my every word for a while. As I was championing him to do the right thing. He was put in that office I believe he was the state's attorneys general, and before he was governor. He was prepared. God had prepared him to handle what it was that was done, and he gave them a pass. He accepted from them a $7 million soft bribe to give to first responders for like equipment, fire equipment and shit. But you have to know that the firemen, the first responders, they were told to not put out the fires. So for 3 days, they stood and watched all of those millions of pounds of carcinogens go into Pennsylvania. And not one of them said anything, to warn those thousands of people that were left oblivious. We're, from the time we're kids, my generation, you've got several, I was still in the generation where I was of that generation where you had like 13 channels, UHF and VHF, but all together maybe, maybe, I'm being honest here, maybe there were 9 channels that you could get because, with whatever antenna, if you had a really good antenna, maybe you could get 13 channels. But I remember, when there was a news broadcast of weather, what have you, or something, whether it was a tornado warning or a hurricane or heat, about the heat index or whatever the hell it was, man. We would listen for those, trust the media, the local news stations to alert us. And all of those motherfuckers fucking stood down and did what those multi-billion-dollar corporations wanted them to do, keeping it quiet. All of them. So I tell you, we're in a time of such corruption, but the cowardice, man, is what the corruption. I was aware of corruption. That didn't surprise me as much as the cowardice, where you got people that, I don't know, it's hard to, when you really think about it, it's like it's been 3 years gone by now, 3 years. And I'm still just dumbfounded by how prevalent cowardice is. And that's everybody. I mean, everyone, even 2 presidents, President Biden and President Trump. Believe me, they were both given all of the irrefutable evidence, to go ahead and it could have been indictments, should be indictments, criminal indictments, criminal prosecutions. I'm telling you in truth. That's what should have been done, and 2 presidents gave impunity to these multi-billion-dollar corporations. But it's not just, it's everybody from the local authorities, the police, all the way up to the president. They're all fucking, subject to that epidemic, that cowardice. It is. And look how disgraced so many have been. That's something that's defining of one's character. It's shameful. Shameful. I don't know. I couldn't, in Jesus' name, now I understand. I understand why God hates cowardice, and that it is an attribute, courage is an attribute of God, Yahweh. I wouldn't have had, I would have been infected and would have been stifled, subdued, whatever you want to say. I would have capitulated to that atmosphere of cowardice if it weren't for Yahweh through Christ Jesus, Yeshua, birth name, Yeshua of Nazareth, risen, exalted, glorified. That's my testimony. I tell you in truth, I wouldn't have had courage to upload all of the evidence, that irrefutable, manifest evidence of the crimes that were committed, if it weren't for Yahweh, God Jehovah, appointing that it be captured and uploaded immediately onto Twitter. And even though there were people that probably working for Norfolk Southern that screen grabbed my captures, and then they reposted them on TikTok with promotion, with the title Darlington, Ohio instead of Darlington, Pennsylvania, to obfuscate, to keep Pennsylvania out of people's thoughts, to positioning, man, psychological positioning. I knew something about it because I spent just a little bit of time in advertising. I had such a disdain for, manipulation of, that aspect of using my talents to manipulate people into thinking a certain way, or, whatever choice they would make. It turned me, like my talent. I was an award-winning graphic illustrator, made a living. And then when I got into the aspects of it that way, with the manipulation that's involved with marketing strategies and shit, that I just couldn't do it. Even though I also had physical disabilities, man. I got injured when I was in the Air Force by no fault of my own. And I was turned away from the VA when I went there for help. Man, I needed 2 spinal fusions, and they wouldn't help me. But when your neck needs fused, man, you can't hold your neck and a certain. I couldn't hold my neck to work. It got to the point where I was really so messed up I couldn't even do that. I had to always keep my chin up high, and then I got to the point I had to wear a brace before I had the surgeries even. But I'm saying it turned me off, though. Even if I wouldn't have had the injuries, that so debilitated me that I couldn't work, in any way like that, in anything that exacerbated, my injuries to my spine. But when you are doing something that is degrading, when it, you're ashamed of yourself. What the hell, if you need to get out of it. You need to find something else to do. Anything that would, would make you feel ashamed. Why would you want to do something that's going to make you feel ashamed? Think about all those first responders and everyone that was involved in covering up that massive contamination, thousands of people. Here, with what I just talked about, all of the people that had a responsibility to sound the alarm, all of the people now that should be compelled to bring those perpetrators to justice, and they don't. They've got this case of willful ignorance. They know. I provided. If you look through the evidence that even though they shut down my YouTube channel, which I was using as like a file sharing tool, to share the videos and shit, I still have up all that's necessary for criminal indictments and prosecution of a lot of people that are involved in this fucking massive man-made disaster that was hidden. But cowardice it's like what surprises me the most. even now when and look, we've got you've got a handful of people that that could fucking lead humanity into a fucking nuclear war. It's a handful of people. Think about how fucking cowards, how many cowards there are, the coward epidemic of cowardice. There should be people fucking yelling, screaming, stop. What? Instead, they ignored those atrocities committed against those defenseless people in Palestine, and they see that nation state of Israel is doing the same thing in Lebanon, doing the same thing, man, wanting to do the same thing to Iran, have the United States to, do work, do all of these crimes against humanity. It doesn't matter if you fucking if you're ignored or not, man. I mean, this is the kind of shit that people should be screaming at the top of their voice, and there have been people that we have seen some courage, but I see a lot of cowardice, man. I see a lot of cowardice, and I'll tell you, I have been a coward before. I have been, and that smothering. It's like the worst that you can feel about yourself is when you are a coward. And what we see with our authorities is they'll pick other duty, whereas they'll out somebody that's weak to go after weaker, somebody that, of course, they won't go up against a multi-billion-dollar corporation, or whatever authorities condoned it or were a part of it, but to go after somebody that's weak, and they'll then, esteem themselves by their catalog, that way, I don't know, by whatever, how many people, weak kind of, you know what I'm saying? And they have that to reflect on and tell people about. I'm not going to tell you about how they did nothing about a massive intentional burn off of carcinogenic industrial chemicals. And they won't tell you about, the fact that they either were complicit with them in their crimes, or that they didn't have the courage to even raise their voice about the criminality of what it was that was done. So you got, I see cowardice all the way from the local authorities on the scene all the way up to the President of the United States. You wouldn't think of someone as audacious as President Trump as a coward. Well, which it's either one of two things. Either he's so corrupt and jaded that, he's doing those people a favor by not outing them, by not bringing them to justice. Or he's afraid to do it. It's one or the other. It's one or the other. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. But I had sent out all of this irrefutable evidence to President Trump too, and I know that I saw that he came out and he said something. He was outraged. He showed some outrage, and this has just been within the past few months. But then he turned around and he gave $10 million to East Palestine, federal money. People there and to the west of there, that where none of the contamination blew into. People that won't fight for, the 34 containers because the 5 containers they're basing it on, I mean, they consider that pretty good fortune, considering they didn't get the contamination. And all they have to do is just go along with the lies. But the people in Pennsylvania who know that it was fucking like 34 containers of hazardous material that was illegally burnt off. They don't do anything. Nobody's fighting any of that. I contacted the court that's handling the silencing settlement. Everybody. Nobody will do anything. The state's attorneys general, the federal attorney general, everybody, the Justice Department, Environmental Protection Agency, Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, our military, our Department of Defense, Department of War. Because our guardsmen were used to commit a crime against our citizens. They were used to keep people out from capturing the preparations that were done for that massive burn-off. But what I've seen with this, it's so depressing. It's like, I don't know, man. So when I see these things happening with, Iran being fucking attacked when they didn't provoke an attack. And, even now it's possible that fucking Israel, that godless Israel, would even use fucking nuclear weapons. Why doesn't somebody stop fucking that monster? It must be because Satan has a stronghold with him and has power. He is the god of this world. And that's all, it is literally the Antichrist nation of the world, Antichrist Jesus nation. That's what it is. But I don't think they're, those that make up the decisions there, with the nation state of Israel. I don't think they really practice the faith Judaism, because even without Christ practicing Judaism, if you truly are an adherent to Judaism, you're not going to do the things that the nation state of Israel is doing. I'm telling you, that's the truth. It isn't just that there's mercy in Christ. There's mercy for anyone that's practicing Judaism. It's truly inherent to, Judaism. But you see love, God's expression of love through Christ, through Jesus, through Yeshua, truly forgiveness of sin, grace. But Judaism is not evil. It's the perversion of Judaism. Them exploiting Judaism. Man, it's so evil. And, if you are ignoring it and you've convinced yourself that it's okay what they're doing, you give them place, I'm sorry, to cowardice, which I do understand. I'm not saying that I'm not a coward. I understand it. But man, it is so prevalent. It is it is like an infection. When you hear alarms, pray to God. Say, Yah, please may they arrive safely where they're going. May they be at their best. May they be able to save somebody's life. In Jesus' name. Please, Lord, when you hear the sirens, you hear the fire trucks going by. When you hear the sirens, when you know there's an emergency, pray for those people that are involved in everything. The police, the firemen, everybody. Everyone. And Yah will hear you in Jesus' name. Surprise the watchers, the holy angels, and all spirits there will see all these things going on. Surprise them. because you're being led of the Spirit. In Jesus' name.